We'll do a review in the Sichas and Chelek Tes Zayin, volume 16, the fourth Sicha for the portion of Beshalach. This is a Lomdish Sicha which the Rebbe discusses Eruv Tafshilin. We know that when when Yom Tov precedes Shabbos, in order to be allowed to cook on Yom Tov for the coming Shabbos, one has to make a Eruv Tafshilin from before Yom Tov. And that Eruv allows the person later on to carry to cook from Yom Tov for Shabbos. So the Rebbe basically is going to be a lot of the discussion about the reasoning for Eruv Tafshilin from the Gemara and in the Alter Rebbe Shulchan Aruch, but the main question that the Rebbe presents over here is that it seems to be in the Alter Rebbe a difference with the tradition, what to do with the Eruv, what to do with the bread that we use for the Eruv. By the Eruv Tafshilin, the Alter Rebbe brings down that we should keep it until the third meal, the Suda Shlishis, and then eat the Eruv Tafshilin. But then we have an Eruv Chatzeres, where you use the bread to make the Eruv for the yard so that you can carry. Over there, the Alter Rebbe doesn't bring down the tradition of keeping it till Suda Shlishis, only till the second meal of Shabbos, but not the Suda Shlishis. So what's the difference? The reason we keep it is to do another mitzvah. So how come over here we're doing it, waiting until the Suda Shlishis before we eat Eruv Tafshilin, but by the Eruv Chatzeres we eat by the second meal, the second of Shabbos. And the Rebbe explains Bichlal to that the Eruv Tafshilin is the positive aspect, according to at least one day, of on Shabbos itself remembering the Shabbos, and therefore we keep it till the end of Shabbos in which we can remember it. But by Eruv Chatzeres, there's no remembering over there. Over there, it's only to do another mitzvah. But the mitzvah of eating bread is more by the second meal than the mitzvah of Beshalach, so by Suda Shlishis. And therefore, when you're using the Eruv Chatzeres, the second meal, not only you're doing another mitzvah, but you're Mekayim Suda Shabbos with it, which is definitely a greater inyan to have it together. But when it comes to Eruv Tafshilin, as the Rebbe will explain, there's the additional aspect that the Rebbe also rules, like the opinion that there is a positive Zochreyu to remember the Shabbos. So then, as long as we can keep it the Shabbos, the level of Zochreyu, we should keep it. That's how the Rebbe explains it basically. And then there is a whole big inyan and also Yenishal Torah. Let's go step by step. So we'll start Beshalach Dalet with Aleph. So the Rebbe brings down by Eruv Tafshilin is the din, the Eruv Tafshilin, so that you can cook on Yom Tov for Shabbos. So the halacha is as bald know them vi meendig zugereden alle tzorchei Shabbos. So on Shabbos, on Yom Tov itself, so once you've finished to prepare all the needs of Shabbos, so you've really used the purpose of the Eruv. The Eruv is there so that you can cook from Yom Tov to Shabbos. So once you've already done, the din is megmen oif essen dem Eruv. So you can eat that Eruv. You no longer need it. It was there for the purpose so that you can cook from Yom Tov to Shabbos. And once you've done that already, you can eat up the Eruv. Noch in dem Tag von Yom Tov, still on the day of Yom Tov, you can eat it up. Steht aber in Maharil. So, however, the Maharil writes that that's not the best thing to do to eat up the Eruv, but rather we should leave the Eruv for Shabbos. It states in the Maharil, as hat eingeführt, that he had made the tradition, lo niach kiker ha'eruv tafshilin, to leave this loaf that they used for the Eruv Tafshilin, lelechem mishna belel Shabbos. First, they used it as the second bread for Friday night, and again ubishacharisei, and to use that bread for shacharis as the second bread, as the lechem mishna. And on the third meal, he would actually make the bracha. He would eat the loaf of the Erev Tafshil. This is also brought down in the Maharshal. It says, and since we need to have the Erev lasting, where tradition is not to eat it up on Yom Tov, but to wait. So so it's not fit to eat it but till the night of Shabbos. And yet, the tradition of the Maharam was laniach hakikar tachas alechem mishnah b'leil Shabbos, to place the kikar underneath the lechem mishnah on the night of Shabbos, ulam machrosei, and for Shabbos morning the next day, ubesuda gimel hoya b'tzeya olav, and he would eat it, eat that challah or that loaf, that kikar, on the third meal of Shabbos. Misachar this aved be mitzvah achas, ro'i lasis olav mitzvah sacheres. Once we have done with it one mitzvah, it's appropriate to do other mitzvahs on it. So now, if we take a look at the Alter Rebbe goes along with this idea that the Maharal and the Maharil brings down, or what the Marshal brings down, that to keep it for the third meal, the Alter Rebbe brings down as well. And then we'll see that by Erev Chatzeres, even though this minhag is brought down by the Maharil, but the Alter Rebbe doesn't bring down that minhag by the Erev Chatzeres, that the loaf of Erev Chatzeres that you should add it and eat it in the Shabbat, doesn't bring down. The Alter Rebbe bring that up on the minhag in Shulchan Aruch. The Alter Rebbe also brings down this tradition, this custom in the Shulchan Aruch. This is the language the Alter Rebbe says. Lechatchila tzorich sheyihu hapas v'hatavshil shemurim etzlei. That to begin with, the bread that they used for the Erev Tavshil, the same thing is bread and a tavshil, but you have for the baking, for the cooking, so you have a pas and a tavshil. So both of these items should be kept etzlei ad la'achar shetikin kol tzorchei Shabbos, until you have already prepared all the needs of Shabbos. So you could, and then technically you can eat it up on Yom Tov still before, but you have to keep it for the duration until you finish cooking and baking for Shabbos. Yet the Alter Rebbe brings down mitzvah min hamuvchar lahamtil melechu lapasel erev tavshilin. It is a mitzvah. The best way is to wait with eating the pas of erev tavshilin ad echad megimel sudis haShabbos, till one of the three meals of Shabbos. Kidei livtzoyolov, so to make the bracha on that in one of the three meals. And the reason why we want to do that, because there's a mitzvah to have lechem mishnah, and you've already had a mitzvah of Erev Tavshilim with this loaf. Shekol dover shenasid by mitzvahs achas. Any item with which you have done already one mitzvah, roi lasis by mitzvahs mitzvah acheres. It's fitting that we should do an additional mitzvah. Make it for the lechem mishnah. On one of the meals of Shabbos, use that loaf for the lechem mishnah. The Rebbe adds v'yashnoigim, and there are some that have the tradition not to break that loaf of the Erev Tavshilin until the third meal of Shabbos. Then you're doing not only one mitzvah, but you're doing several mitzvahs, because you're going to make that loaf the lechem mishnah for the first meal, for the second meal, and finally you're going to eat it at the third meal. We leave this loaf as lechem mishnah for the first meal, the night, and then you leave it as the lechem, make it as lechem mishnah in the second meal in the morning, shel Shabbos, and then finally on the third meal. So the shlishi, then you'll actually make the bracha on it and you'll eat it. So you'll have so many mitzvahs Lecha Mishnah of all these, and also the bracha of the meal of the Suda Shlishis. Where does this idea come from that once we've done the mitzvah, we should do another mitzvah? That comes from the Gemara, and that comes actually from the loaf that is used for the Erev Chatzeres, not by the Erev Tavshilin in the Gemara. So the source of using the mitzvah that you use for one mitzvah, in that case, the Gemara is talking about the Erev Chatzeres, that the mitzvah that you use for the Erev Chatzeres should be used later on for Shabbos. Based, they're mocked from their svara, the source for this idea. As about with their zachis gitog geworden named mitzvah. Since with this item, one mitzvah was done, which is the Erev Tavshilin, is right to turn them with noch mitzvah. So therefore, it's fitting, it's proper to do with it an additional mitzvah, which is Lachem Mishnah, the double breads for all the meals through the Shabbos, is in Gemara. That's we find the Gemara by Erev Chatzeres, by the Erev that you make for the courtyard. The Gemara says like this, quoting Rabbi Ami v'Rabbi Asi, that Rabbi Ami and Rabbi Asi have a misramelu rifto the eruva, when it would happen to them that they had the bread loaf, the bread of the Erev that they used, and Rashi explains that the day before they had made the Erev Chatzeres. So then what they would do, so they would make on that loaf the bracha lo yitzi lechem min haaretz. Amri, they would say, since one mitzvah was done with that loaf, it was served as an Erev Chatzeres, let's do another mitzvah to make the bracha amayitzi lechem min haaretz, the Shabbos meal on it. Let's do another mitzvah. So the Gemara's source is from Erev Chatzeres, and actually the same like we find that there's a mitzvah min hamuvchar to wait till Suda Shlishis with the Erev Tavshilin quoted before. We find the same thing with regards to the Erev Chatzeres, that we should wait until the Suda Shlishis and use that loaf as a Lechem Mishnah for the preceding meals. Also by Erev Chatzeres state in Maril. Also by Erev Chatzeres it stayed in Maril. Ubeleil Shabbos u'b'shachris. But the Friday night in the morning, ani manicha l'Lechem Mishnah. I place it for the Lechem Mishnah. Va'omar the gam beleil Shabbos yichel. He said, well, you don't have to. You can eat it on the night of Shabbos already once it's waited. Like Choviv Allah laharav is by mitzvah, but it's dear to him. He wants to do more mitzvahs. One Lechem Mishnah Friday night, another Lechem Mishnah Shabbos morning. And then, as he says, the Suda Shlishis b'Shabbos ho'yibetzei l'kikar. So on the third meal of Shabbos, he would break and eat that piece of loaf, the one that he did there of Chatzeres. So that's the Maril. Also the Maharshal we quoted before with regards to the Erev Tavshilin says the same thing also by Erev Chatzeres. When Azoy bring the Maharshal, v'chein nohagu be'eruv Chatzeres. That the same is by Erev Chatzeres as me'estes erst by the Suda Shlishis, that we first eat it by the third meal. Nogdem the Melektas to Lechem Mishnah by the Tzvesh Sudas, after putting it as Lechem Mishnah by the first two meals, the by Erev Tavshilin. Then, just like with the Tavshilin, you finally eat it at the third meal. The same thing is with the Erev Chatzeres, that you eat it at the third. But let's take a look at the Alter Rebbe Shulchan Aruch. The Alter Rebbe doesn't bring it over here by the Erev Chatzeres. Over by them, Din bringt Arop, the Alter Rebbe. This halacha, the Alter Rebbe just brings down, not the Psak halacha from Ramah. He brings down just the ruling of the, as brought down from the Ramah. Yesh livtzoya olav b'Shabbos shachris. We should make the bracha on it to use that loaf of the Erev Chatzeres on the morning of Shabbos. The hoyil v'nasis by mitzvah achas yesh lasis by gamkein mitzvah acheres. Since one mitzvah was done, the mitzvah of Erev Chatzeres, we should also do another mitzvah and use it as the Lachamishna and use it for the meal of Shabbos. Und bringt nicht darauf the Minaganal, but he doesn't bring down the above tradition to be sein von Erev, erst by the Suda Shlishi, to eat from it, to that loaf of the Erev Chatzedes, to wait till the third meal, kidei laharbis by mitzvah, in order to greet the mitzvah. So that we verstehen, so we have to understand. Bald as the Maril and the Marshal, since the Maril and the Marshal, their mon and the minhag, they mention this custom. Sai by Erev Tafshilin, and Sai by Erev Chatzedes, both by the Erev that we used to cook from Yontif to Shabbos, and also by the Erev Chatzedes to carry over there on Shabbos in the courtyard. Ein Farvos bringt der Alter Rebbe the minhag nor by Erev Tafshilin. So how come the Alter Rebbe only quotes this tradition when we're talking about the Eruv Tafshilin? And he doesn't say by Eruv Chatzedes to wait till Suda Shlishis, only by Eruv Tafshilin. Uvefrat, especially taking into consideration that the source of this thing to wait for Shabbos and to do another mitzvah comes in the Gemara with regards to Eruv Chatzedes and not by Eruv Tafshilin. And the Alter Rebbe mentions it by the Eruv Tafshilin and doesn't mention it by Eruv Chatzedes, which is the source of this whole tradition to wait with the eating of the Eruv. Befrata disvore, especially that this idea, hoyil vis aved b'mitzvah chodo, navid b'mitzvah chirito, since one mitzvah has been done with it, let's go ahead and do another mitzvah. Hot ir moker by the Eruv Chatzedes Kenal has the source by Eruv Chatzedes in the Gemara said earlier. So why does the Alter Rebbe not bring down that special tradition that he does bring down in Eruv Tafshilin and doesn't bring it down in Eruv Chatzedes? So now the Rebbe is going to point out that Emerson, this thing to wait with the loaf of bread until the until Friday, till the Suda Shlishis, that's lessening the value of the Eruv that you want to do a mitzvah with it, because the Suda Shlishis, we don't even need bread over there. Why don't we say on the second meal, which is a chiyuv pas according to all opinions, so that would be a more mitzvah than just doing it with this. So the Rebbe is going to explain with this question this the whole idea over here. Gimel, that man does verstehen, so we will understand that Nogdam the Mevet Bavorenen Ashverikait, after answering a difficulty, to explain a difficulty in the Etzem Minhag, in the tradition itself to break the bread of Erev Tafshilin on the Erev Tafshilin by Sudas Gimel Shel Shabbos, on the third meal of Shabbos, Kidei Lasis by Mitzvahs Harbe Chulu, in order to do many mitzvahs. So why are we using the loaf of the Erev Tafshilin for Suda Shlishis to do a lot of mitzvahs? Why would we leave it for Suda Shlishis? It seems to do a lot of mitzvahs would be more appropriate to do it in the second meal, because then you're doing a mitzvah of Suda Shabbos, where the mitzvah to eat bread. In the Eshket Sudas for Shabbos, in the first two meals of Shabbos, is doch do aggressor chashivas in their Suda Shlishis. There is a greater importance in the first two meals than in the third meal. Like Kamadeyas, according to many opinions, Darf man nicht haben kein Lechem Mishnah by the Suda Shlishis. You don't even need two breads by the third meal. Nachmer, even more than not needing two breads. Andere halten, other are of the view as the Suda Shlishis darf bechlal nicht haben kein Pas, that the third meal doesn't need bread at all. It's sufficient to use a a food item from the 5 species, which is a mezainis. You don't even need red chut. Business that in the front days, there's even such opinions that said, as that you don't even need mezainis. You can be fulfilling the obligation of the third meal with fruit, etc. Is nicht glattig, so then it's not understood. Farvozom and obligen to Beitzeh sein, if a kicker. So why should we delay to break the bread for the kicker of the Erev bees? There's the shlishi is till the third meal. When the achila from pas davke. Over there is to specifically eat bread doesn't apply there. It's not as a choshev, it's not as important. Or the negative maybe it's totally optional. You don't even need bread by the third meal. Why are we delaying? Let's say, don't eat the bread on the second meal. Wait till the third meal, in which there is no real obligation to eat bread, and maybe not even, and maybe it's entirely optional. It would seem it would have been more fitting to say that you should eat the bread in the morning meal. Then you would use the Erev need lois the mitzvah. You would not just be doing 2 times the mitzvah of lechem mishnah by the first meal and by this meal, but you would actually be eating the meal, the mitzvah of the meal of Shabbos with this bread of Erev Tafshilin. But you would also tie the actual eating of the Erev with the mitzvah v'chivos with the Shabbos, with the mitzvah obligation, the meal of Shabbos. Asudavas is l'kulam and pas, and that's a meal which, according to all opinions, there's an obligation to eat bread. So, what are you going to say? Well, we want to use the possibility of 3 times lechem mishnah. But if you're not mechuyev lechem mishnah, but the actual bracha itself that you're making on it, that you're going to have later, you have now too. So you basically have the lechem mishnah, you have the mitzvah of Sudas Shabbos, and you have the birchas hanenim making the bracha also there. We can't need zogen. The Rebbe explains. You can't say Ados is to leave them was demult. It is because that then we're doing a third mitzvah with the loaf, which is birchas hamaitzi by the Sudas Shlishis. The level, the blacha hamaitzi to the Shlishis. So you have. So even if it's not mechuyev in bread, and you don't do the mitzvah of lechem mishnah, but you're still getting a bracha of birchas hamaitzi. But that birchas hamaitzi is there by the second meal as well. Or vibald as by the shlishis is the comment the day is the toder chiyuv from pas. So the obligation of pas doesn't apply there. So you are not fulfilling a mitzvah of Suda Shabbos vadai with that bread. That you're fulfilling more by the second. And on top of that, in them blois the only thing that you're having at the third meal is you're making the bracha for enjoying food. You have to make a bracha. So you're also making a bracha. So that applies, that is also there when you have the morning meal. So Noisev the mitzvah from Lechem Mishnah, in addition to the mitzvah of Lechem Mishnah, and I would add over, I think it should Lechem Mishnah, and the meal of Shabbos, which is a chiyuv. He also has the Birchas Hananim. So why should we push it off? And now the Rebbe is going to come to explain by first bringing down from the Gemara the 2 reasons why we'd use the Erev Tafshilin in order to allow us to cook from Shabbos, from Yontif to Shabbos. We need an Erev Tafshilin in order to cook on Yontif for Shabbos. And the Rebbe explained that Rebbe brings down from the Gemara and from the Rebbe Shulchan Aruch that it's either to honor the Shabbos or it is to honor the Yontif. Then the Rebbe will explain how through honoring the Shabbos, that's a continuous aspect of the Erev Tafshilin, and that's why there's a svara by the Alter Rebbe to keep that until Suda Shlishis, as opposed to Erev Chatzeres, as with the Rebbe will bring this out. Now, the Birnda, the explanation of this. In Gemara, werd gebracht zwei Taimim. The Gemara, it brings two reasons of the takona von Erev Tafshilin. Why did we institute? There's two reasons for the institution that the rabbis instituted, that you should have, in order to cook from Yom Tov to Shabbos, that precedes Shabbos, you have to have an Erev Tafshilin. Aleph. Rava says, the first opinion in the Gemara is Rava, in order to make sure that the person chooses something, a good portion for Shabbos and a good portion for Yom Tov. The rabbis wanted to make a special Erev, a special food left for Shabbos, to remind the person when he's cooking for Yom Tov to remember the Shabbos as well. Don't use up everything for Yom Tov. We make you put away something on Yom Tov before Shabbos, so that you leave something important. So does it. Upirush Rashi, because you're making the Erev Zoicher es HaShabbos, then you remember Shabbos, so he doesn't consume everything for Yom Tov. So we're making the Erev the Chachamim want to make an Erev Tafshilin basically to benefit the Shabbos, so that the person leave some food for Shabbos, cook well for Shabbos. So they said, you must make an Erev Tafshilin. That's how he's going to remember the Shabbos. Was Leviza is the takona from Erev Tafshilin kedei laharbez b'kved Shabbos. According to this opinion of Rava, so the reason we have the institution, the haldakona of making the Erev Tafshilin, is that's in order to increase in the honor of Shabbos. That's why we have the institution. That's the opinion of Rava. Rabashi Beis, the second opinion is Rabashi Omar. Rabashi says, kedei sheyomru, the reason the Chachamim wanted to make an Erev Tafshilin is people should say, therefore, they say we're not just allowed to cook from Yom Tov to Shabbos without leaving an Erev. In other words, it's not such an easy thing to go ahead to cook for Shabbos, even though Yom Tov is not as chomer as Shabbos, and still Yom Tov is so important that in order to cook from Yom Tov to Shabbos, you must have an Erev Tafshilin. So the person will remember that he's not going to cook on Yom Tov for the weekday, because even Shabbos needs an Erev, so you're not going to cook. So that is to protect the person from cooking from Yom Tov to the weekday, so we make him have an Erev. So that people will say, hey, Yom Tov l'Shabbos, you're not allowed to even cook from Yom Tov to Shabbos without an Erev. That's why for sure you can't gonna cook from Yom Tov to Chol. So we're going to keep the Yom Tov cooking specifically for Yom Tov. Not for Chol. Loitim is their tam, so it means, according to Rabbi Ashi, the reason is in order to increase the honor of Yom Tov, that we should protect the Yom Tov. What would be the difference for the nafkemina lahalocha? What would be the difference in practical halacha zwischen the zwei time, in between these two reasoning? Zog der Rosh, the Rabbeinu Osher says that loitun tam from Rava, the first reason brought down here, which is Kidei Sheyivler Mona Yofel the Shabbos, that the intent is to honor and pick a good meal for Shabbos. Muzman machen dem Erev Davke Erev Yom Tov, then we must make this Erev specifically on the eve of Yom Tov. You have to do it because you're cooking on Yom Tov. We want to make sure that you don't use everything up, so we want you to make an Erev before Yom Tov in order to remember the Shabbos. So it has to, in order to remember, you have to do it on the Erev Yom Tov is when you place the Erev. So to remember the next day, Muzman Machan Erev Davke Erev Yom Tov, In a tog v'nagrei de machol mukovid yontiv, on the day that you prepare the food for yontiv. Und der Erev at in der Monen in the Tzorchei Shabbos, the fact that he made an Erev will remind him for the needs of Shabbos. So that has to be done. What happens? Let's say he makes an Erev 3 days before, be earlier. By the time Shabbos is going to come, he's not going to remember Shabbos anymore. In a freer you can talk, if you're going to do it in a day that precedes before the day of Erev Yom Tov, but this im nit genug helfen zu gedenken, that would not sufficiently remind him. Seine Tzorche Shabbos in him talk from Erev Yom Tov, not going to remember the needs of Shabbos and Erev Yom Tov. So you must make the Erev Tavshilin right before Yom Tov, according to his reason. The reason of Rabbi Mashen came late in time from Rabashi. According to Rabashi's reasoning, we're trying to protect that a person should not be cooking on Yom Tov for the weekday. You don't need to do that right out of Yom Tov. According to the Talmud Rabashi, people would say, "Thus you can't cook from Yom Tov to the weekday." Is genug lois dos was the erev is kayim erev Yom Tov. Then it's sufficient for the erev to be in existence in erev Yom Tov. You don't have to make it an erev Yom Tov, but it's sufficient. You can make it a few days before erev Yom Tov. That will be enough to remind you. Aber Asiyas ha'erev can zayin for erev Yom Tov, but making the erev could be before erev Yom Tov. So now, what is the Alter Rebbe? The Alter Rebbe actually switches the order of Rav and Ravashi, 2 reasons, and he rules that it's better to be careful and make if possible, the Erev and Erev Yom Tov, like to worry about the second opinion. But if you made it already earlier, you didn't make a new Erev, you can rely on the first opinion. The Alter Rebbe breaks it up by the time in Shulchan Aruch. The Alter Rebbe brings down both of these reasons of the Gemara in the Shulchan Aruch. But in a Farkerten Seder, the Rebbe will address this, why the Alter Rebbe changed the Seder in the Pnimius or in Yonim. The Alter Rebbe addresses it later on, but he brings down that Aleph, he brings down Yom Tov to increase in the honor of Yom Tov, so people don't cook from Yom Tov on the weekday. And Abayz, and the second is Shabbos to increase the honor of Shabbos, to remember the Shabbos and cook a lot of good food for Shabbos as well. Liver money for the Shabbos. He brings the above mentioned difference of the halacha, whether you can make the Erev earlier. If it's laharbez b'chvei Yom Tov, then you can make it earlier. If it's laharbez b'chvei Shabbos, it has to be done right on Erev Shabbos. What does the Alter Rebbe conclude? Practically speaking, you should not make to begin with an Erev only on the Erev Yom Tov Mamish, for this Yom Tov alone. Commotion is by Lefi Tama Beis, as explained according to the Tama Beis, which is the remembering the Shabbos that needs to be done right before Shabbos. Lachatchila, make the Erev then. And only for this Shabbos, so that the Yom Tov will remember the Shabbos. Shenizbayel Vitam Habes. Avol B'di'evet, but B'di'evet. Shekvar Erev Yom Rabim Kodim Yom Tov, that if you did make an Erev for many days before Yom Tov, Uber Erev Yom Tov Mamesh Shokach Chulu B'lo Erev, but on Erev Yom Tov, actually, on Erev Yom Tov, you forgot. You didn't make an Erev. Mutter Lishmach Al Eruv Chulu, you can rely on the Erev, you're allowed to cook from Shabbos, from Yom Tov to Shabbos, and which means B'di'evet, we accept the opinion of Rabbi Ashi, that we're protecting the Yom Tov. It's enough that you made before, and therefore you can go ahead to cook on Yom Tov for Shabbos. Thus haste. What it means is that to begin with, we need to conduct ourselves, that we also need to forewarn the reasoning in order to choose a good piece for Shabbos. That would be the right thing to do, that we have a protection for the Shabbos, therefore you should do it right on Erev Yom Tov Mamish, but B'di'evet will rely on the covered Yom Tov, on that reasoning, and that will be Okay. So the Rebbe will continue to explain now. It's not only whether it's for Shabbos and Yom Tov, the two different opinions, but it's also what is the takana? Is the takana positive, which is to remember Shabbos, or the takana is negative, not to forget Yom Tov? Let's look inside. Hey, der Chiluk zwischen the zwei Timing, this difference between the two reasons is nicht nur si the takana is zu lieb Yom Tov or zu lieb Shabbos. It's not whether this takana was because of Yom Tov or because of Shabbos. Now, noch mehr in Teuchen takana, there is a difference in what the takana is, the contents of the takana. Leut and Tam from Rabashi, according to the reason of Rabbi Ashi, that we should not come to cook from Yom Tov to the weekdays, is there Teuchen hat takana shlila. So the idea, what is the takana? It's negative, to prevent. Und in zwei Protim, and in both ideas, to prevent. Aleph, zu bavonen an Indian Isur Shlili, it is coming to caution us about a prohibition, which is a prohibition is a negative, which means not to cook on Yom Tov for the weekday. Mizonli nichshel werden, that you should not stumble in an Isur from Bishul B'Yom Tov L'Tzorechel, in the prohibition of cooking on Yom Tov for the weekday. Und therefore number 2 base. Kum di takone. So therefore, what is the takon itself? To shelu zayin, to asrun dem Bishul B'Yom Tov L'Shabbos, and that's why now we're dealing with a prohibition that you're not allowed to cook from Shabbos for Yom Tov, because we don't want you to cook from Yom Tov. We don't want you to cook from Yom Tov to Shabbos, because we don't want you to cook from Yom Tov to the Chol. So it's all negative. We're cautioning a negative, and we are doing a negative, and not allowing you to cook from Yom Tov for Shabbos, unless you started to cook one tafshil from Erev Yom Tov, which is the Erev Tafshil. That's the reason, the negative. That's the reason of Rabashi. As opposed to the reasoning of Rave, is Teuchanat Takon Chiv. So the contents, the idea of this Takon is all positive. When in debate the Pratman on the two aspects that we were talking about before. Aleph, we're trying to make sure that Shabbos gets a proper preparation. Not to take care of a prohibition. We're trying to prepare properly for Shabbos. Aleph, durch der Takone, wird bevornt. Through this Takona, we make sure, as the Achona to Shabbos was Einki the boy, that the preparation for Shabbos should be properly. To choose a good piece for Shabbos. It's for the positive. And therefore, base, as the Iker Hatakone is thus aveklegen them Erev. So the main thing is that we should put down the Erev. Was their month, not so much not to cook without putting the Erev, but the mostly is to put the Erev over there, which reminds us their month, their chiyuv to make the Shabbos. That reminds you to prepare the needs of Shabbos. So it is a positive. So what you're going to say, well, but there's also, you're not allowed to cook if you didn't put the Erev. But that is just so for the purpose to prepare for Shabbos. That Easter from Bishul Yom Tov Shabbos, side the macht free in the maid. Then we have a prohibition of not cooking for Yom Tov to Shabbos unless you made the Erev. Is not to verstärken the takona for Nachana Shabbos. The boy is only coming to strengthen that which the institution to prepare for Shabbos necessary. And this is going to be the Rebbe's idea that the purpose of the Erev Tafshilin may have, according to Rava, it has this positive aspect to it. That may be a reason why we need that till Suda Shlishis, as opposed to the previous reason of if the reason is because the negative. Let's look inside, and we'll see that that positive reason does not apply to Eruv Chatzeris or Eruv Tavshilin. Both. But first, the Rebbe explains, based upon this idea that, according to Rava, it is mainly the takone, it is the positive to prepare for Shabbos and to put away the item for Shabbos so that you remember the Shabbos, explains to us another aspect in the Gemara. This is a side point that will explain why Rashi interprets the Gemara in a certain way, although it would seem that maybe Rashi should be differently. But this explains it. Let me explain it. Apizev et sein verstandig, noch Hanenia will understand another idea, another item, another aspect. The Gemara bringt zwei Asmachtes from Posuk von Din von Eruv Tavshilin. The Gemara brings two leniency, two supports from the verse of the Din of Eruv Tavshilin. Of course, the Din of Eruv Tavshilin is a Din midrabanon, but the Gemara brings two psukim which we can lean these takona derabanon on those psukim. Number one, Aleph. Omar Shmuel. Shmuel says the Omar Kro Zocher es Yom Hashabbos lekadeshoy. Torah says in the Zechiris to remember Yom Hashabbos lekadeshoy. So we say, the reason that you should remember it is because you're forgetting, you might forget it. So in Aseres HaDibros it says, why do you have to remember Shabbos? Because you might come to forget it. So that's a hint, because Erev Shabbos, Yom Tov, Erev Shabbos, and you might cook just for Yom Tov, so Zochrei, remember, that's a hint from this pasuk. And then later on, the Gemara says, "V'tana ma'aseh mehocha." Our Tana, another Tana, brings it from another pasuk. It's the pasuk in this week's parsha. Es asher toifu eifu, ves asher tevashel bashelu. That which you cook, and that's the connection also to Parshas Beshalach that we're learning the Sicha, as the Rebbe will bring down here. So the pasuk says that which you bake, and that's what you cook, which means that it has to be baked first in order to bake it. So when I have the Erev Tavshilin, you have the pas and the Tavshil for the Erev Tavshilin. That's when you can go ahead and bake from Erev Yom Tov to Shabbos. Mikan Omar Rabbi Elazar in Eifin Elo al ha'ofu v'chulu. That you do not bake only if there's something baked, if there's an Erev Tavshilin. Mekan somcho chachamim le'eruv tavshilin v'natoira. From here, the chachamim instituted Eruv Tavshilin from the Torah. So on what the Gemara says, that you have to remember the Shabbos because you're bound to forget it, is Rashi Mefarish. Rashi explains, quoting Rashi, Shebo Yom Tov Erev Shabbos, when Yom Tov comes to Erev Shabbos, Korev Shabbos Ishtakeach, Machvas Yom Tov Shemar B'Sudas Hayoyim. So it's likely, it's very close that the Shabbos will be forgotten because of the Yom Tov in which he increases a lot in the meals of the day. And he doesn't leave for Shabbos, sufficient of the honor. And the Torah has warned you here, so when you are making the Erev Tavshilin, it turns out that you're remembering it. So this whole entire Rashi, that Rashi brings explains the pasuk Zachareu Ma'achar Shabola Hashkichai. This is like the first opening of the Gemara after the Mishnah says there about Erev Tavshilin, and the Gemara brings down this pasuk as the Asmachta. So Rashi very clearly learns this according to Rava, that the covet of Shabbos is the issue here. Both from Pirush Rashi in the Buban as the Asmachta from Pasuk Zocher Hashem Shabbos Lekatshe, that this Asmachta is Zocher Yom Shabbos Lekatshe, Zochrei Ma'ach Shabol Ashkichei, which is remembering as what the Gemara says is not a Leuten Tam von Rava, it's only in the Rava. Rashi doesn't say remember him because you're going to forget the Kedushas Yom Tov, etc., and because not to violate cooking from Yom Tov to the weekday. But why would Rashi choose to explain this pasuk only according to Rava? That's the opening of the Gemara over there before the Gemara is even brought down. The machlokes between Rava and Rabashi. But l'chayra is not move on. L'chayra is not understood. The Gemara brings beide time. The Gemara brings both reasons from Rava and Rabashi. Behemshich to the Rasmachta from pasuk Zocher Hashem Shabbos Lekatshe. First, the Gemara says, Minohan and Mili, where do we know this, that you have to make an Erev Tavshilin? And the Gemara brings the pasuk of Zocher Hashem Shabbos Lekatshe. And then the Gemara brings, following this pasuk, both reasons, Rav and Rabashi, as a follow-up to this Asmachta from this pasuk of Zocher Hashem Shabbos Lekatshe. And this second Asmachta, that was a Shatefu, that the Gemara brings down after bringing down the machlokes of Rava and Rabashi. So, und die zweite Asmachta bringt die Gemara erst noch nach bringen bei der timing. That's after the Gemara brings down the reasons of Rava and Rabashi, the two reasons for Rava and Rabashi. Hein Farvos nimmt Rashi on the Asmachta from Posik. So how come Rashi accepts that this pasuk, which says he translates it completely like Rava? Zocher Hashem Shabbos Lekatshe is Leuten Tam von Rava. Why is it only the reason? So the Rebbe says because the second reason emphasizes the negative, not to cook from Yom Tov and Shabbos. This pasuk of Zocher is the positive, is how to remember the Shabbos. Al pi anal is moving. Based on the above is understood. The limud from der zweite Asmachta, what we learn from the second Asmachta, drikt ois di takone in an oifen shalili. That expresses the takone in a negative of not to do. It's not remembering. It's not desecrating the Yom Tov. Ein oifen ela alavi. You can't bake. Only it was baked. It's not to honor something. It's not to remember, but it's just not to do unless you have made the office. So the emphasis is on the negative of not baking. That there is a prohibition here of cooking on Yom Tov for Shabbos. Sideness is the ha'afi, unless there is something baked. B'chamishi b'Shabbos, on the Thursday of Shabbos, when it's out of Yom Tov. Yom Tov is on Friday, and this is has to be awfully from before, like the second Asmachta, Mashenk in the limud from Posik Zocher Hashem Shabbos Lekatshe. But the way we learn from the Posik, that the Gemara starts off over there, Minon Emili Zocher Hashem Shabbos Lekatshe. That expresses in a positive. As smooth Zayin is you have to remember it. Well, the Rebbe nemt on Rashi, so that's why Rashi accepts. And he learns that the Asmachta from Zocher Hashem Shabbos Lekatshe, that this posik of Zocher Yom Shabbos Lekatshe, which is used as a lenient from the idea of Erev Tavshilin, is Leuten Tam von Rava, is according to the reason of Rava, as the takona from Erev Tavshilin, that the takona of Erev Tavshilin is an inyan chiyuv, it is a positive. In order to choose a good portion for Shabbos. So the idea of the takona here is the positive, to help the Shabbos, versus the other opinion of Ashi, it's to prevent from the negative of Yom Tov, so it's not associated with the Zocher Hashem Shabbos Lekache. That's only Elim Kain Bashel Bashelu, that there has to be prepared from before Yom Tov in order to cook. And the Takon, as Rebbe said, in order to cook, that's only when you have made sure that you're not going to desecrate the Shabbos through the Erev. So now, so the Rebbe says that according to Rava's opinion, which the Alter Rebbe rules as Rava as well, he says that you should l'chatchila make the Erev on Shabbat, Erev Yom Tov Mamish, in order to remember Yom Tov. So, therefore, according to this, logic dictates that you should actually keep it throughout the Shabbos, remember the Shabbos for as long as you can. Zocher Hashem on the Shabbos itself to constantly remember, not only on Erev Shabbos, but also on the Shabbos itself. Zion. Based on the above, as Loit Rava is the takona from Erev Tafshilin. That according to Rava, this institution of the Erev Tafshilin, that this is a positive matter from Zochareyu Machar Shabbat Ashkichai. We're going to remember it because you might come. It's probable that you might forget it. So we can say, as Hortan Ort Loit Dem Tam, that according to this reason there is room to halten ganz the Erev Tafshilim Euchen Tov from Shabbos Gufa, to keep it whole also in the entire day of the Shabbos. Because Agam, as when the ending zugreten alle Tzorche Shabbos, that when you prepare all the needs of Shabbos, is Meshem Bavoren from Shash, from Korev Shabbos Lishtakeach, that Shabbos might be forgotten. You already cooked everything. So why would there be a need to continuously remember the Shabbos? After you've already finished cooking, you're not going to forget the Shabbos. So since you're caught of the Shabbos, like so you don't have to worry about it, that you're not going to leave because you already finished. You're not using every thing up for Yom Tov. You're leaving for Shabbos. You're finished cooking. You're all set already. But yet, high time, and that's why Taka the reason you can eat it. Yet von deswegen, and yet the Baal der Erev bavorim dem inyan chiyuvi zochreyu, since the Erev is what cautions us and protects us, this positive zochreyu is mistaber, so it makes sense at the zikorim mitzad ha'erev, that this memory, to remember this, that's because of the Erev. So doyer and eichen Shabbos gufa, that should last also the Shabbos itself. What's the simple meaning? As the simple meaning of the words from Zocher Hashem Shabbos Lekache. That means on Shabbos itself. So Amedar Gedenken Shabbos in the talk for Shabbos Gufa. That remember Shabbos, to sanctify it on Shabbos, not on the day before. So that is mistaber, to keep it on Shabbos Gufa. Signanach, in a different style way to say this. Is a Shabbos Shabol Hashkicha. Since it is a Shabbos that you might come to forget because it comes right after Yom Tov, is the Zocher es Yom HaShabbos Lekache Fundem Shabbos. So when the Pasuk says, remember the Shabbos Lekache from the Shabbos, Mitat Toishes Hadgosha, there is an additional emphasis for this Shabbos to remember it. That should also be through the Erev Tafshilin that you keep on Shabbos. So we're not just keeping the Erev on Shabbos because we want to do another mitzvah for it, but we're keeping it on Shabbos because this is the way to fulfill the asmachta of the Zocher Hashem Shabbos Lekache, that Erev which is the emphasis for remembering the Shabbos. We can say Ados is der Tam besteht in Maril by Erev Tafshilin. So now when you look closely, look at the reasoning that the Maril writes when it comes to Erev Tafshilin. He says, over there, he says, V'toiv lahoisir miyom tov l'Shabbos. He says it's better Wow. Okay, we know the halacha. You could eat it up technically because technically you're done, but it's better to leave it over from Yom Tov to Shabbos to help the maid of the Shabbos. But for stimas l'shoinoi, he doesn't say to do another mitzvah. He just says generally, without qualifications that to do another mitzvah, he says better to leave it to the Shabbos. So from this stimas l'shoinoi, without just cross the board, without qualification, is mashma ados is nit nor mitzadem tam. That is not only because of the reason that he continues says v'hoyil mis abed bei mitzvah chodachulu, because he's done one mitzvah, do another one. Or nochmer. Okay, so that's number one, and even more. If you look in the language, it says moving mashekosuv biminhogim. From Maharat Tirna over there, from Maharat Tirna over there, it's right. It's written, "The Yishmer ha'erev achi kones haShabbos." Keep the erev to Shabbos answer. What is it, mashma? Because v'aloy time shel Rava, because according to Rava's reasoning of Zochar Yom HaShabbos, the positive is das halten dem erev of Shabbos ahisofin dem Zochar. The keeping the erev of Shabbos is an addition to the Zachareu from Erev Tafshilin, to remember Erev Tafshilin. Yes, it's enough Zachareu on Erev Yom Tov, and you can eat it up once you've done the Malachas Yom Tov for Shabbos already, but better to continue it. And the Rebbe is going to show you also in the Lashon of the Alter Rebbe, in the precise language of the Alter Rebbe, which we see this idea, Ches. And the difference, the way he writes it by Erev Chatzeris, and the way he writes it by Erev Tafshilin. By Erev Tafshilin, to the Alter Rebbe, it's a continuation of the Zochar Yom HaShabbos. By the Erev Tafshilin, it's just because you've done a mitzvah, do another mitzvah, but there's no continuation of the Erev Chatzeris into Shabbos. Ches, the mit is euch verstandig, the diuk haloshim from Alter Rebbe in Shulchan Aruch. We also understand the precise language of the Alter Rebbe in the Shulchan Aruch. By Eruv Chatzeres schreibt by Eruv Chatzeres he writes, Eruv ein tzorich li is kaim elebein hashmoshes v'chulu. The Eruv only needs to be in existence, lasting during the bein hashmoshes. V'yesh livtzoya olav b'Shabbos shachris, and there is to make the this is by Eruv Chatzeres. It doesn't have to stay only bein hashmoshes, because that's when you carry, that's when the Erev takes effect in Bein HaShmoshes, Bein Chatzeres, and you should break the bread, use the bread, Shabbos Shachris. And he says, the Hoyil, the only reason he says there is since the Nasi by Mitzvah Achas, the Mitzvah Bein Chatzeres, Yeshlastas by Gamkein Mitzvah Acheres, you should also do with it another mitzvah, the mitzvah of Shabbos, the mitzvah of Shabbos meal, the Suda Shabbos. From this flow of the language is understood. What is this perfection that we're telling a person to break the bread, to use the bread on Shabbos Shachris? It has no connection to the idea and the definition of Erev Chatzeres. It's just there's a mitzvah Erev Chatzeres, there's a mitzvah of Milu Shabbos, one mitzvah, do the other mitzvah. It's just something else. It's not connected. The mitzvah of Shabbos Shachris has no connection to the Erev Chatzeres. It's something, a side point over here. You did a mitzvah with the bread as Erev Chatzeres. You did one mitzvah, do another mitzvah. But over here, as opposed to over here, Alter Rebbe writes by the Erev Tafshilin, is a medayik. He emphasizes specifically lechatchila tzorich sheyu hapas v'hatafshil shmurim etzloi, to begin with. The bread and the tafshil need to be kept by him ad la'achar shetikin kol tzorchei Shabbos, until after you have prepared all the Shabbos needs. Sha'oz rashoyi la'ochlom, then you are permitted to eat them. Me'ikir hadin, halachically, u'mekom mekoim mitzvah min hamuvchar, the best way to do the mitzvah, doesn't tell you anything about one mitzvah, another mitzvah, but the best mitzvah to do. What do we do with that bread with the Erev Tafshilin? Lahamtil malachel pas shel Erev Tafshilin ad echad megimel suda Shabbos, to eat, to wait and eat the bread of the Erev Tafshilin till one of the Suda Shabbos, kedei lift soya olav, to make the bracha. He says, "Kol davar shenase b'mitzvah achas rui lei b'mas b'mitzvah acheres." For any item that you've done one mitzvah, the mitzvah of Erev Tavshilin, do another mitzvah of Suda Shabbos. Because from the diuk, the kishur, haloshin is moving from the precise and connecting language. It's understood as the anhoge from lahamti melachalav plus ad echad megimel Suda Shabbos, that this conduct that he tells you to wait to eat from the bread until one of the meals of Shabbos is nit nor azaitikering it. It's not something just you did a mitzvah, do another mitzvah now, like we said before by Erev Chatzedus. Nor oich am mufchor in their mitzvah. This is actually the best way in the mitzvah itself, in the mitzvah of Erev Tavshilin, in the meaning for Erev Tavshilin. The best mitzvah for the Erev Tavshilin is that it lasts to do with the other mitzvah, because you are continuing the positive of the Zochreu, of the analysis mover. Based on the what we understand, but them was benutzt them Erev bepoil. Through that you use actually the Erev. But Tzorchem is Suda Shabbos for the needs, and the meal of Shabbos is Memekayim dem Zochreu. You're fulfilling Zochreu, remembering him in an Oifen for Mitzvah and a Mufchar in the best way. On the far, Zok der Alter Rebbe, that's what the Alter Rebbe says. This is a mitzvah min amufchar for the Erev Tafshilin to wait for it. Why? Because the Alter Rebbe rules like Rava. Pasken doch as lechatchila darf men sich neuig sein euch wie der zweite Tam lahar bezukveit Shabbos. Because he also passed like Rava that lechatchila you should make the Erev mamash and Erev Shabbos, because to take into consideration the view of Rava. So therefore, he says mitzvah min amufchar, because we rule like Rava lachatchila. If with the zweite tam lahar bezukveit Shabbos kinal simdalet. So that's why he says to be to caution according to this opinion as well. So now we understand why the Alter Rebbe tells us to keep it until the Erev Tavshilin, until the Suda Shlishis and not the Erev Chatzos. Because by Erev, because according to Rava, this is part of the Zochreu. The Fi Bir Hanal, but they are verstandig, according to the above explanation, we'll also understand Favos der Alter Rebbe bringt the Anhoge from Mitzeya Zayin of an Erev by the Suda Shlishis, nor by Erev Tavshilin, or not by Erev Chatzos. Why he brings this conduct to break the bread on the Erev by the Suda Shlishis only when it comes to the Erev Tavshilin and not by the Erev Chatzos. This is musbarli il, as we explained earlier, as loy dem tam as Erev Tavshilin is kidei laharbez b'chveit Shabbos, that according to the reasoning of Rava, who says that the reason we have a Erev Tavshilin is in order to increase the honor of Shabbos, is oich, so we said, is oich das nutzen dem Erev litzorchei Shabbos an inyan fun Zochreu. So also when we use the Erev for the needs of Shabbos, that is part of remembering. That's part of the Zochreu. Kumtoi, so it turns out, as vos mer und länger benutzt dem Erev, that the longer and the more you use the Erev by the Sudas Shabbos, by the Shabbos meal, which would include by the erste zwei, the first two meals, the lechem mishnah for lechem mishnah, by the dritte livtzoya olav, to make the bracha on the loaf that was used for the Erev Tavshilin, still part of the Shabbos, is Al Smer Hadgoshe v'Yisrael. It's more emphasis, and there's more advantage in them Zochreu, in the remembering Shabbos, because you use the Erev Tavshilin, which, as the Rebbe explains, the use of the Erev is the Zochreu. The more you use it, the more emphasis, the more Zochreu there is. Yeder Moven es the Machol Shabbos. Every time when we eat the foods of Shabbos, was Matsugigrei, that one prepared Yom Tov, Durchan Erev, that one prepared on Yom Tov through the Erev, is men moisif in them Zochreu, so then you are adding more remembering. Durch Mishatev sein zu der Suda, dem Erev Tavshilin, by partnering and bringing in that Erev Tavshilin as part of that mitzvah. In other words, when mehalt them Erev by Yeder Suda, when you hold on to the Erev by every meal, oich by der letzter Suda, also by the last meal. Der Suda Shlish is the third meal. Verbindt dem Zochreu, then you tie this remembering from the Erev Tavshilin, from the Erev Tavshilin mit kol Sorchei Shabbos, then you tie it to all the needs of Shabbos. Bis the Samel letzte Tzrochim, till the very last needs of Shabbos, through the Shlishis. It's coming the end of Shabbos, and still you're bringing in the Erev Tavshilin part of it. Oich mit der letzte Suda, also with the last meal. So, when is this said? By Erev Tavshilin. By the Erev Tavshilin was mitzad dem etzem geder von Zochreu by Erev Tavshilin, or by Erev Tavshilin, that just because of the definition of the Zochreu, by Erev Tavshilin is do asvore, then there is an idea. So how the Erev Bizner Suda Shlishis, there is an idea we should hold it till the third meal, because that is part of the Erev Tavshilin of the Zochreu. That is part of the positive. That's only by Erev Tavshilin. Masha'enke by Erev Chatzeris, as opposed to Erev Chatzeris, vus is nito oder tam together, where we don't have this reasoning and this definition is ledas admur hazoken nito kein. So according to the Alter Rebbe's view, again, as opposed to the other views that the Rebbe brought down, that they say also, the Rebbe brings down the order of 40, what the reason of the Maharil and what's exactly their reasoning. But according to the Alter Rebbe, the Rebbe is explaining here in the Pnim, so the Alter Rebbe thinks the Tokein Svore to lozen them Erev of Su'uda Shlishis. There is no reason, there's no logic to leave the Erev for the Suda Shlishis, because the Rebbe's argument is it's less of a mitzvah, the Suda Shlishis, than it's a mitzvah at the second meal, so you better eat it at the second meal. Is ledas admar azok and talking svara to los and them Erev of Suda Shlishis. There's no reason, there's no logic to leave it for the third meal. Because on the contrary, see is beser. It's better to make the bracha on it in Shabbos in the morning than the hot derbai than kiyum mitzvahs achilas sudas Shabbos. When you have also the mitzvah of eating the Shabbos meal, as suuda was muzhoben pas lekulam. It's a meal that must have the bread according to everybody. Kenal Sid Gimel, as we brought down earlier in Sid Gimel. Again, so the Rebbe basically says by Erev Chatzeris, there is really no connection to the Shabbos itself, to the Erev Chatzeris per se, to the Shabbos. So therefore, the biggest mitzvah is the Shabbos day meal. But according to the, when we talk about the Erev Chatzeris, Over there, it's different. Over there, the connection between the Erev Tafshilin with Shabbos is the Zochreyu, so therefore there is logical that there should be that connection as well. And now the Rebbe explains in Pnimis Avodah, in Avodah Hashem, Yud, the Roh for them Inyan Hanal in Avodah Hashem. Explain the above idea in the service of Hashem. The Chiluk Tzvishin Shabbos, the difference between Shabbos and Yom Tov is Mevuar in Zohar, is explained in the Zohar. As Shabbos wird angerufen Kodesh, Shabbos is called Kodesh itself, when Yom Tov is called Mikroi Kodesh. We call the Kodesh, we invite the Kodesh. While Yom Tov is men blois koire, we call, which means we are mazmin the bechina from Kodesh. Mikroi Kodesh, we invite the level of Kodesh. Das heißt, which means man is mazmin and Kodesh in an ord zman from Chol. We invite the holy into a time which is weekday. It's a regular weekday, and we break it into Kodesh by making it a Yom Tov. Masha'enkin Shabbos is the bechina from Kodesh Alim, as opposed to Shabbos is the level of Kodesh himself. Das heißt, this means Zman HaYom Tov mitzad atzmei, the time of Yom Tov and of its own, is shaykh in Yom Nechayos. There is applicable. You can do weekdays. It's a weekday. Und the avodah for Moed Hashem asher tikru oisom atem. So what becomes the avodah, the Yom Tov of Hashem, that you call them, and it's not oisom them, the Yom Tov, but you are the ones that are making the oisom atem. Eden davke by state in mazmizayin that consists in inviting in them the beginners from Kodesh to invite to the level of Kodesh. As the achila v'chulu zol zayin in oifim Kodesh, so that the eating should be a holy eating. Tzadik oichel l'soiva nafshay. The reverse is better than the shoyim techsar. Tzadik oichel l'soiva nafshay means that the eating and the food has holiness to satisfy his soul. L'chein Shabbos v'sis mekatshe v'kaimo mitzad atzmei. So in Shabbos, which is really Kodesh in itself, is Kule Kodesh. So there is no even room for Psoilus. Ain't by Psoilus Kalal. So over there, as we say, Peresh Chagechem, it doesn't say Peresh Shabbatchem. There's no Peresh, there's no leftover, there's no Psoilus in Shabbos Mitzadel. Ashenk in Yom Tov, but on Yom Tov, it could be Peresh Chagechem, there could be Peresh. Is oibes felt by vidosir from them Eden. If in the Yid's avoided there's lacking, afile by miyochid, even by the individual. Afal pi was the tikru atem from Bezdin is given b'shleimus, that even though that you invited and the Bezdin said that this day is Rosh Chodesh and therefore the Yom Tov comes out on that day of the month, and that was complete. Is do peresh chagechem. If you don't serve, there could be leftovers chagechem. Peresh chagechem ka'amar v'loy peresh shabbatchem. There's the peresh of the festival, not the peresh of Shabbos. The avoida is in atog vos mitzad atzma is nitoke peresh. By Shabbos, the service is in a day by itself, by definition, on its own. There's no peresh. Umemela nor. So therefore, it's tzaddik oichel l'soiv nafshe. There's only one option over there. The tzaddik eats to satisfy his soul. There's no negative possibilities of like a Yom Tov. Derech the Chilik zwischen dem Oifun vom Mesaken sein dem Rab. This difference between Shabbos and Yom Tov is similar to the two styles, two ways of how to fix the evil. Al derech madanim midvorim charifim oy chamutzim. Not the two ways. I mean, the way, how do we fix the Ra is that you make delicacies from items that are sharp or bitter. Chamutzim, rak shehem sour, people things that are sour or sharp or sour. You make them, spice them up, and you fix them up, so you make them, so you have like from the ra, from the negative, in the possibility of you invite it, you tikrois, I mean, you switch it around, and you make it mazmin, and you make it into kodesh by taking the madanim and making madanim from dvorim charifim chamutz. Und dem Eufen, and the other way would be that as there is no ra to begin with. It's just, that would be like Shabbos. Similar to having delicacies from sweet and enjoyable things. Und das ist der Chiluk b'pnimis ha'inyonim. And this is the difference in the inner matter of things between the zwei timing of Erev Tavshilin, two reasons for Erev Tavshilin. Leuten tam ases is kidei laharabes b'chved yomtev, according to the reason that we make the Erev Tavshilin to protect the yomtev, which basically means is toichen hatakone, the main and the content, the idea. What are we doing? What are we institute? Shlila. We're trying to caution negative. And if it is to increase the honor from Shabbos, that is chiyu, that is the positive, to bring honor to the Shabbos. Kinal sivhei baruch. So this fits with Yom Tov and Shabbos. Yom Tov has ra, you have to protect it, so that's the shlila. Shabbos is tzadik oichel l'seiva nafshei. There is no peresh shabbatchem, there is only the positive. Ibald, as in the avodah for Yom Tov. Darf men mevarer u'misaken zayin in yonei uzman choil. Since the avodah of Yom Tov, we need to sort out and correct matters, and the time of the weekday is oich de takona. That's why the way it's instituted is laharbois b'kaved Yom Tov b'dugma. So how do we increase the kavod of Yom Tov? Also by protecting and fixing the matters of choil. So inyan from choil shlila, that we need a caution from matters of weekly and negative. But according to the reason to increase the honor of Shabbos, the Shabbos is mitzad atzma mekacha v'kaima. In of itself, it is holy, and it's not connected to any choil. Hecher von yonei choil. It's higher than matters of choil. Mitzad atzma is nitovos to shelo. There is nothing to exclude here. It's holy. Seiden das bringt das rein Rahman l'Islam. Only God forbid if you violate it. Now they ma'aser shaloi the chilul, but your action, you are desecrating, or the word chilul is gam meloshim choil. Weekly, you're weakening the Shabbos. Is the zach von the takona? Therefore, what's the takona there? Lahoisif oir oifzuton an inyan chiyuvi, to do a positive matter. And now we will also understand why the Alter Rebbe brings the two reasons in a switched order, and he brings as the first reason the Kavod Yom Tov, Kosur Meira, is always absolutely necessary. Then comes Aseitoi. Now we can also explain in the inner matter of things. Why the Alter Rebbe brings the two reasons in the opposite order, as they have been brought in the Gemara. First, he brings down the Tam Laharbiz B'Kvayis Yom Tov. The Alter Rebbe brings down to increase the honor of Yom Tov by making sure that we're not going to desecrate the Yom Tov by cooking to Chayil. When they're not Laharbiz B'Kvayis Shabbos, then he brings the reason to increase the Kavod Shabbos. Because as Cholas HaAvodah, the start, the beginning of the service, is Tama Aleph. That's the first reason, quotes the first reason, is the Avodah for Sur Meira, the service of staying away from evil. koilel bisman the yomtev mechoil. That in time of yomtev, when you start, you're changing it from choil, making it yomtev. The first thing is to make sure that it's not choil. Take away the choil. Laharabes b'kved yomtev. To increase the kved yomtev, to take away from the choil, make it kodesh. Ikroi kodesh. Und erst danach kommen zukommen. Only afterwards can you come to them to the higher level of service. Tamabez, that comes the second reason. Laharbez b'kved Shabbos, to increase the honor of Shabbos v'asei kenau, and to do it as before. This is also the explanation. We should go by the second reason, which means do it. But if you can't, minimally, we need the first reason. We need the Sur Meirah. And that's why the Alter Rebbe says to start with, you should do it an Erev Shabbos, the Erev too, because of the second reason, Kved Shabbos. But b'diavad, at least you have the Sur Meirah. Das ist das Bore, was lechatchila darf man sich neug sein, lefitam habes. To begin with, you have to go by the second reason. Aber es ist nicht leikuva, but it doesn't stop. You don't have to. Vidos is lefitam aleph kinal sigdal, which is according to the first reason, that over there we must have the Erev Tafshilin done. Kinal sigdal. Dos was es monzich from Yedron Ulikuva. This that is demanded of each one, and it has to be done. And without it, it doesn't work. It prevents the person from moving on, and that is B'chol Mokum B'chol Zman, that is in every place and every time. B'chol Inyan, and every matter is Sur Mirah, to stay away from the Ra. Di Avodah, that service of Sur Mirah, Muz Zayin Bayed Name, that needs to be everyone. As opposed to the service of negating that there should be the finding, there should be no Ra, no existence of Ra. Not only as it affects his actual thought, speech, and action, just to change yourself around. Is not yet can not everybody can accomplish that. The riber, and therefore is in ir the toder inyan for likuva. That's why it doesn't hold you back. Like the difference of tzaddik and benoni, shekol odem yochel is benoni. Everybody could be a benoni, but not everybody can be a tzaddik. So not everybody can fix the asay toiv to change it around, but to Sur Meirah, not to do that a person can accomplish. But derech hachiluk, the iskafi v'ishapur, is similar to the difference. You can subdue, but you can't necessarily turn it around, which would be a tzaddik. From deswegen. But yet, to begin with, we have to start our conduct as according to the, not start, but we should try to take into account the second reason, and do asay toiv similar as explained in many places as kidei de avoida for the skafia so zainki de boyu ba'amitis, that in order for the service of subduing should be as should be, and truthfully, in order to iskafia should be properly muzman haben euch da avoida for this hapo. You also need to have to turn yourself around. Your inside, al koponim izman lizman, at least from time to time, to have a level of ishapch. Al derech hamevur in kuntrus eitz hachayim, similar as explained in the kuntrus eitz hachayim, legabe dem inyan from yichude ilo and yichude tator, the two levels of the unity of Hashem, the way it is from the above, and the unity of Hashem, the way it's from below, was the avoida shemitzad yichude ilo, the service that comes from the unity that is from above perspective is hapcha, that's to turn around. And from the perspective of the lower level of yichuda, that's iskafi, that's to subdue. So it says in many places that you need some yichuda ilo in order for the yichuda tato to work. As kidei da avodah von Yichud Torah soll sein, kedeboy b'mitzvah, that in order the service of Yichud Torah shall be as need be, and truthfully, Muzman Habun dazu the avodah von Yichud Law. They need to add to that also the service of Yichud Law. Afilu di by velcha the avodah von Yichud Law, even those who cannot constantly have the level of Yichud Law, can design by mitzvahs. They can't truthfully hold that on a regular basis. You still need, from time to time at least, to have Yehuda Ilah, so the Yehuda Torah should be proper. So you need some ishapcha sometimes in order to have the iskafia. And you don't, maybe not be able to always have the level of Erev Tafshilin Le'ikuba for the level of Shabbos Le'istakona, but the level of protecting Yontif to prevent from the Ra, that we has to have all the time. Based the truism and Mosif Nochan Inyan. Here we're adding a additional aspect. As need nor darf men sich noyeg sein lechatchil lefitav beis. Not only should we, to begin with, follow and conduct ourselves as the second reason, but darf al kol ponim as v'yesh noyhagim. And those, some conduct themselves was verto begebracht Shulchan Aruch, still brought the Shulchan Aruch as a yesh noyhagim. Nutzun dem Erev Tafshilin by the Suda Shlishis, to hold that Erev Tafshilin also by the third meal. Was in them seine Dotzvik Tzovas, these two extremes. The Erev great meant to Erev Yom Tov. The Erev is prepared from before Yom Tov, which is Gor in Tchilas HaAveda, that is in the beginning of the service. It's even before the Aveda of Yom Tov. But on the other hand, every Yid has the power already when he starts and preparing for the Aveda. Zu greiten sich nicht nur zu the Dargas b'Shabbos b'chlal, not just to prepare for Shabbos in general, but I feel that to the Suda Shlishis, you can prepare yourself for the third meal. Osiskedua, the Darga Chil Yodim Shabbos as known, that's the greatest level of Shabbos. Or Magam, although as halt noch gor b'tchilas ha'avodah, even though he's standing, he's just starting out the service. So he's starting an Erev Yom Tov and he's holding it up to Suda Shlish's highest level. He's aber durch dem was tracht tut meise, was is verbunden mit Shabbos, through thinking and actually doing something which is connected with Shabbos, the Erev Tafshil. Bis der Suda Shlishis, and he's holding it till the Suda Shlishis. So this will impact him as the Bavoide Bavocher halt. So that service that he does hold by, so getomveren kiteboyu by mitzvahs, it should be done properly and truthfully. The noch bringen, and then later on to bring him to a noch hecher avodah, to even a higher level of avodah. This is Mesichas Shabbos Bereishis, the Svadus base, the second Fabrengen of Shabbos Bereishis, which was a hemshech, the Simchas Torah Tovshin Chai to Simchas Torah Tovshin Chai. And this Rebbe continues in the footnote, Shechal Oz, B'yom Vov Erev Shabbos Kodesh. So Yom Tov, Simchas Torah came out on Friday. And this was a Fabrengen on Shabbos Bereishis, which was the time that the Erev Tafshilin was eaten. But Eilil B'fnim HaShaych is the Erev Tafshilin, the Suda Shlishis Davka, the connection of Erev Tafshilin. It brings down to this connection of the Suda Shlishis to have the greatest, the Raivin, the greatest level of the Shabbos. That's the Zochrehu, that's the ultimate Zochrei of Shabbos. When Isbayer Barucha Be'isvadus was explained to Fabrengen, Shazohu Tam B'Ashtus. This is the reason, simply, L'Isvadus B'Torah Hemshech L'Simchas Torah, to Fabreng as a follow-up to Simchas Torah, is Man the Suda Shlishis the Shabbos Bereishis. That is in the time of the Suda Shlishis of Shabbos Bereishis, Hasomuch Simchas Torah, which is next to Simchas Torah, Shachal B'Yebov Shabbos Kodesh. So basically, the Erev Tafshilin that came out on Vav Shabbos Kodesh, basically that Erev was supposed to be eaten on that Suda Shlishis, and that's the Fabrengen that the Rebbe is Fabrengen, the Hemshech from Yom Tov of Simchas Torah, which took place on Friday.